We continue with our series of selections from the HaChaim on Parshas Hashavua. This series is dedicated for lizchut שלמה for Ariel, רינה, Aster, Shetachia, לרפואה שלמה, בתושח, Chol Yisrael, Tekef Umiyad. So the HaChaim on the very first pasuk of this week's parsha, asks the questions that are, really glaring, from the pasuk itself. It's a very strange pasuk. Chayei, and it was the life of Sarah, 100 years, 20 years, 7 shanim, and 30 years of Sarah's life. So the most immediate question, aside from a lot of repetition of shana, that we're not going to deal with that today. But the more immediate question that's most glaring is that you say, Chayei Sarah, these were, and it was the life of Sarah, 127 years. And you repeat again, Shnei Chayei Sarah, the years of Sarah's life. What are you repeating that for? That's how the pasuk opens up. This was the life of Sarah, these years. What do you have to come up and sum it up? These are the years of Sarah's life. Totally repetitious, seemingly, right? That's the most obvious question. Then there's a question that's also very obvious, maybe not as obvious, but very close to that. The way the pasuk opens is atypical of any time the Torah records a lifespan, right? Parshas Bereshis, it says, "Vayechi Adam, Vayechi Shein." And they lived. It doesn't say, and it was the life of, but Vayechi, they lived such and such years. Just Vayechi, they lived, not Vayu Chayei, and it was the life of. Or alternatively, by Avraham Avinu, it says, Eila Shnei, these are the years of. Right? So so it's either these are the years of, or they lived such and such years. But it was the life, right? Vayu Chayei, and it was the life of Sarah. Right. I don't know if there's even another place in Tanakh where it is worded that way as it is in the beginning of the pasuk. A little bit extra words, and it doesn't even flow so well. There's got to be a message here. Right. These are the two questions that the HaChaim wants to deal with, and he has at least 4 pshatim, maybe 5 right here. I want to deal with the last 2 out of the whole slew of pshatim that he has to deal with these 2 questions. All right. And I'm going to actually deal with the last pshat that he says first. All right. So he prefaces that Vayu, similar to the word Vayihi, like Vayihi b'meach Ashverosh, it is a Chazal say to understand as a lashon tsar, like Vayihi b'meach, there was pain. Vayihi, and as the Medrash, which lays down this principle, says Vayihi, Vayihi could be is a compound word. Woe, it was, or woe it will be, right? With the vav mahapech that it will be, but it actually means past tense, right? With the vav at the beginning of the word. So it's a lush of tsar, and he makes the point, Vayihu. It could also be understood the same as Vayihi, lush and tsar. So his final pshat out of the 4 or 5 that he says is a very creative pshat, and it fits very nicely in the words. If Vayu is a lush and tsar, right, lush of pain, so indeed, Vayu Chayei Sarah Mea Shana. Painful was the life of Sarah for 100 years. Listen to his cheshbon; it's brilliant. First 90 years, she's childless, right? So now being childless is very painful for a woman who wants to be a mother. And he invokes the pasuk by Rachel Imenu, right? That by Rachel Imenu, it says, give me kids. She tells her, otherwise it's like I'm dead. It's like I'm dead, right? So that's no life. That's so painful that's called no life at all. So it's like I'm dead. It's like no life at all. Certainly painful to the point where it's called no life at all. And hold that point because it's significant. Okay. Finally, at 90, right, she has a son, right? But the simcha is not complete because she's got Hagar in the house, but more so she's got Yishmael, who used to pick on Yitzchak and even attempted to murder Yitzchak a few times, Chazal say. So until Hagar and Yishmael are finally thrown out of the house, right? Till they're finally thrown out of the house. But when was that? That was when Yitzchak was bar mitzvah. That was by the big suda that Aaron Vinu made. Was by Yitzchak Vinu when he was 13. So, if Sarah was 90 when Yitzchak born, so she is 103 when finally Yishmael's chased out of the house. Right? She gets rid of Hagar, who she did not get along with, and certainly Yishmael, who she was afraid was killing her kid, would kill her kid, right? So the Torah speaks in whole numbers. So the Torah would say if 103, Torah rounds it down to 100. As is well known throughout Tanakh, certainly in Chumash, Torah speaks in whole numbers. So it is surrounding down 103 to 100. So Vayi Chayei Sarah Mea Shana, the life of Sarah was painful, bitter, right? To the point it was like no life at all, certainly for the first 90 out of the 100, right? For 100 years. Right. Ve'esrim shana ve'sheva shanim, but for 20 and 7 years, shnei chayei, this is the life of Sarah. That was her real life. So the last 27 years, that was her real life, because the first 100 was so pale, it was like no life at all, particularly the first 90 out of 100, because she was childless, which Rachel calls being as good as dead. Right, so the Vayu Chayei Sarah Mea Shana, painful was the life of Sarah for 100 years. Esrim Shana v'Sheva Shanim, but 27 years, the last 27 years, Shnei Chayei, those were the years of Sarah Imenu's life. Right, those were the real years of her life. That's cool, like the famous joke, life starts at 60, because that's when the kids are out of the house and and they're financially independent and But these last 27 years are Shnei Chayei, so those are the real years of Sarah Imenu's life. By the way, Zohar says the very same idea. On Vaychi Yaakov, Yaakov was alive in Mitzrayim for 17 years. Right? The HaChaim doesn't bring this down, but I'm bringing this Zohar to totally support the way the HaChaim is learning that. The 27 years, those were the real years of Sarah Imenu's life. The Zohar says the same word on Vaychi Yaakov Yaakov was alive in Mitzrayim for 17 years. What do you mean? He was alive his whole life. It should say he resided in Mitzrayim 17 years. So the Zohar says those 17 years where he's with all his Shvatim, he's reunited with them, those were the real years of his life. He was most alive during 17 years. So in the same vein of Yaakov's last 17 years being the real time he was fully alive, he was besimcha and he was b'shleimus. Same thing also here. Those are the real years of Sarah Imenu's life. That's how he says to read the pasuk, and that's very cute to say the least. But I want to go to the pshat that he says right before this very last one, which, as we said, is 2 out of a series of either 4 or 5, because it's a very big principle to be mechazik us in our emunah. So going back to Vayu Chayei Sarah Vayu Lashon Tsar, so now that fits very nicely with the Chazal that the Mefarshim bring, that Sarah Imenu naturally could have lived longer, but the Satan came, and told her about the Akedah and the shock of how she almost lost Yitzchak, killed her. Right? So Vayu Chayei Sarah, that her life was terminated prematurely by this pain of the Basura of the Akedah that she couldn't handle. So you might think, God forbid, Sarah Imenu, big tzaddikas, if she would have lived longer, she could have accomplished more, earned more lamabo for herself, but of course, more importantly, do more to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. Right? The reason why we want to live a long time, we daven for Arichos Yamim, right, is because Kihem Chayenu Varach Yameinu Vem Nege Yom V'Layla, with more time to live is more time to learn, more time to do mitzvahs, more time, minimally if you're even for yourself, it's to earn more Olam Haba, and but of course, more importantly, to Mekadesh, do more for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there's no mitzvahs in the next world, no mitzvahs to do. You cannot earn anything or even do anything to glorify the kingdom of heaven in the next world. That is the unique opportunity of this world, and that's why life is so important, and that's why we daven for Arichos Yamim. So I ola al adas, that Sari Menu, got cheated out of accomplishing more, and that's really the tragedy of someone who dies young. That's really the tragedy of why a person should be upset over someone who dies young, and why anyone would want for themselves and for everyone else to live a long life. It's an opportunity to accomplish, not just, to earn Olam Haba, which shouldn't be the focus, but that's true. Can't earn Olam Haba from the other side, right? But more importantly, it's the opportunity to do something for Hashem. That opportunity does not exist in heaven. Heaven is fixed already. There's no mitzvahs to do there, right? And the tragedy of someone who, Cholila, did not make it for a long time is that they missed out on accomplishing, right? So there's a message here. Shnei Chayei are the years of Sarah's life, which the pasuk ends off. You already said how long he lived. You already said, right? You already said how long he lived. She lived, I meant to say. You already said that. So it's the years of Sarah's life that she didn't have. An amazing thing the HaChaim is saying. Right? If a person dies seemingly prematurely, Shem Yirachem, right? Don't think that that person was deprived of their opportunity to accomplish, to make Olam Haba for themselves, and but more importantly, to be Mekadesh Shem Shamayim. The Rebbe Shem gives the person who died young, right, if they did so, be bonus, right? Some tragedy happened that cut their lives short, right? The Rebbe Shem gives them credit for those years that they could have lived and didn't, as if they lived them to their fullest, and if they did all the mitzvahs that they could have done in those years that they were deprived of. So Shnei Chayei Sarah, the point was Hashem adds on years to her life. He considers if she lived all the years she could have lived, and during that time did all the mitzvahs she could have done, and made all the tikkunim she could have done. It's a big chizuk that in Chas v'Shalom we see the tragedy of a person whose life is cut short, right? That they're deprived of all those years that they could have done good. Rebbe Shem gives credit for all those years. It gives credit as if they lived all those years, and as if they lived all those years to the fullest, having accomplished everything they could have possibly accomplished. Right? An amazing word from the HaChaim, right? A big chizuk. I'll just add that prior, maybe even 200 years earlier, close to that, 100 plus years before the HaChaim, my ancestor, the Maharami Prague, said a very similar word to explain a Mishnah that everyone loves quoting. We say it, before we say Pirkei Avos. The Mishnah actually from Maseches Makkos, right? We say it before Pirkei Avos, right? Kol Yisrael yesh lehem chelek l'Olam Haba. All Yisrael has a chelek l'Olam Haba, guaranteed. Shem Avakol. So you give them your hearts. Netzer Matai, right? Your nation is, all tzaddikim. They will inherit the land, which refers to Olam Haba. Netzer Matai, they're like the emerging branch of a sapling. The emerging branch is called the netzer, right? It's my handiwork to be glorified by, right? So now, what is the Mishnah talking about? So the Rambam, I'll just say it because I wrote a sefer on the whole topic. The Rambam's shot at Mishnah is that Kol Yisrael doesn't mean just by being born Jewish. Kol Yisrael means anyone who identifies as a Jew, which the Rambam defines as believes in the Yud Gimel Ikrim, and that should be a separate series. I wrote a sefer on the topic based on the teachings of my Rebbe of Yaakov Weinberg, with embellishments of my own research. And the Rambam holds that Mishnah talking about anyone who believes in Yud Gimel Ikrim, because that's called to be Yisrael. You accept the Yud Gimel Ikrim, you're in, and that person has a guaranteed Chel Kol. So it's not literally just for being born Jewish. Right? The Maharal doesn't take that approach, right? But the Maharal raises the question that everyone should raise. Listen, did you do good or you didn't do good? If you did mitzvahs, so you earned your Olam Haba. You didn't do mitzvahs, you don't deserve Olam Haba. So why call you so? Why just by being Jewish, right? Did you do your mitzvahs? You didn't do your mitzvahs. Says the Maharal, and I think it's also the Tiferes Yisrael. It says in more than one place that possibly what the Mishnah is talking about is, God forbid, a child that dies. A child, someone who dies, not even in infancy, but even before bar mitzvah, when they're not chayiv in mitzvahs, right? So mitzvahs don't apply to them. They're just, being educated in preparation for mitzvahs, right? God forbid a person dies in childhood before bar mitzvah, never had the opportunity to do a mitzvah to earn their olam haba. Says the Maharal, the same idea. That child gets a theoretical life, as if they led a life full of Torah and mitzvahs. And that's what the Mishnah is talking about. Oh, these are born Jewish, and they die before it goes by their actions. So all they have is their Jewishness, right? They were born Jewish, and they were deprived their opportunity to, have, the power that their actions make a difference, and it goes both ways. You get onesh for what you did wrong, but you get schar for what you did right. So all they have is their Jewishness, right? And they get a theoretical life. Hashem gives them credit as if they lived a life full of mitzvahs. And on that, for that theoretical life, they earn olam haba. I call it theoretical. I mean, it's a life that HaKadosh has gifted them all the benefits if they lived a life of mitzvahs. And he says that's the pasuk means. Netzer matai. The netzer, we said, is the first emergence of the sapling from the ground. So niflamod, says the Maharal, right? That that initial thing that breaks through the topsoil is perfectly straight. It's when the tree gets taller, it leans, right? So says the Maharal, there's our natural goodness. Especially being born Jewish, we're naturally good. That's aside that Yisrael Miloshin Yashar, we're straight, like the sapling up. We're Asher you'll forgive me if I'm not calling the pasuk accurately. Asher Adam Yashar. Hashem made Adam, referring to Adam Arishon, Kodam Achet, made him straight, very big, and he looked for all these complicated calculations, which cause you to deviate to the right, deviate to the left, deviate to the right, Besod Yishmael, deviate to the left, Besod Esav, right? So this, a newborn Jew is Yashar, that the Jewish people are, Atem Kriyim Adam, Vena Akum Kriyim Adam. So we have the legacy of Adam Rishon Kodam Achet in us. That's the whole point of being separated from the other nations. Well, the other nations are rooted in what Adam became after the sin. Klal Yisrael, Besod Atem has the legacy, right, of, we are the remnant and we have the destiny of getting back to Adam Rishon Kodam Achet. And that's the secret that the Avos and the Imos are buried together with Adam and Chava and Mara Samachpela. Also, this week's Parsha, we have the legacy of getting back to what Adam was and was always meant to be. We will be that continuation of Adam Rishon Kodam Achet, and it is our destiny to get back to that Madrega and to get beyond it also, to do the work he didn't do. So, of course, a child born Jewish is born into that legacy of Yashar. Besod Atem Kriyim Adam and Asher Asa Kimas Adam Yashar. That's a lashon of Yisrael, lashon Yashar. Yisrael, Yeshurun, have the word Yashar in it. We're actually straight. As we get older, so we get bent by the Eitzara Tov this way, bent by the Eitzara that way. And that's when we're older that all that bending makes a difference. Like when the branch gets longer, it could bend. But when it initially comes out, ramrod straight. And that's what it means. The Jewish child is born so pure and straight, on target to be a tzaddik, a Talmid Chacham. That's his natural trajectory of the way it's born. And a person who was deprived the opportunity for his actions to make a difference gets that theoretical life, right? As Hashem gives him that credit as if he lived a life, yasher, continuing with that natural yashrus and actualizing it with deeds. He gets credit for deeds he didn't do, with the assumption, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu operates with the supposition that natural straightness that he's born with would translate into deeds that earn Olam Haba and are Mekadosh Shem Shamayim, and he gets the benefit of that life that he didn't physically live. The Rosh Hashanah should never be necessary, but it's a big nechama to understand Mishpatei Hashem Emes Tzadku Yachdav. Hashem doesn't do any injustice, and no one is ever deprived of the opportunity to earn Olam Haba and to make tikkun. Everyone has it, and the ones that seemingly had their time cut short, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives them credit as if they had that time and used it to the fullest. All the Divrei Torah are the Lezchut, Lrefua, Shlema, for Ariel, Rína, Bas, Esther, Betokshar Chol Yisrael. They should have all four Shlema, Tekef Umiyad.